The galaxy was quiet, peaceful, and full of life. Across millions of stars, different alien species lived in harmony. The Zorveni Empire ruled over many planets and had the largest fleet in the galaxy. Their ships were powerful, their armies unstoppable. They had conquered many worlds, and their empire seemed untouchable. No one ever doubted their strength. They were the top dogs in the galaxy, and they liked it that way. In the heart of this mighty empire, the Zorveni leaders looked down on Earth. They thought it was just a backwater planet, full of weak creatures who had no place in the galaxy's grand story. Earth had no advanced technology, no space fleets, and no mighty armies. The humans were nothing more than a story told by travelers. A myth. The Zorveni never even bothered to look closely at the planet. It was forgotten, just another small dot in a vast galaxy. But the truth was different. Far away on Earth, a quiet storm was brewing. Humans had been living for centuries, and while the galaxy saw them as weak, they were far from it. They had survived countless challenges, learned from their mistakes, and grown stronger with each passing year. They were not ready to take over the galaxy, but they were not as helpless as the Zorveni thought. For the most part, the humans were focused on their own lives. They built cities, studied the stars, and dreamed of what lay beyond their world. They had no idea the galaxy was watching them. Most people didn't even know there were other species out there, much less that some were already planning to destroy them. Humans lived simple lives, unaware that their world was about to become a battlefield. The galaxy's leaders had no reason to fear Earth. The peacefulness of the galaxy was a blessing, and no one expected that anything would change. But deep inside, a few aliens began to wonder about the humans. There were rumors, whispers in the dark corners of the galaxy, about a species that was different, about a species that didn't give up easily, about a species that could survive anything. But these were just stories, nothing more. The Zorveni Empire, for all its power, ignored these whispers. They were confident that nothing could challenge their dominance. They laughed at the idea of humanity being a threat. It was an old myth, a story meant to entertain children, nothing more. Their fleet was unbeatable, and their military strategies were flawless. The galaxy had known peace for so long, no one questioned the balance of power. However, the Zorveni Empire was about to make a mistake they would regret. One day, a lone Zorveni scout ship, carrying only a few soldiers, left the Empire's homeworld to explore the farthest reaches of the galaxy. The mission was simple: check out the quiet planet known as Earth. It was supposed to be a routine mission, something no one expected to cause any trouble. They would confirm that the rumors were just stories and report back. Nothing would stand in their way. As the ship entered Earth's atmosphere, the crew members didn't think twice. They expected the planet to be full of primitive creatures, weak, defenseless, and easily controlled. They landed in a remote area, planning to make contact with the humans and see what, if anything, they could gain from this world. But as they stepped off the ship, they realized something was wrong. The air was different, the land was quiet, and then they saw it. A group of humans, armed with nothing but tools and a fierce will to survive, had surrounded them. The Zorveni soldiers raised their weapons, but they quickly realized they were outnumbered. These humans weren't weak. They weren't helpless. They were organized, resourceful, and prepared to fight for their world. A quick battle broke out. The humans, despite their lack of advanced technology, were fast and clever. They used the environment to their advantage, trapping the Zorveni soldiers in a series of clever ambushes. The Zorveni were surprised by the humans' tactics, never expecting such resistance. The fight was short but brutal, and by the time the Zorveni soldiers tried to retreat, they had lost a good portion of their team. As the scout ship scrambled to take off, the humans watched them go. They hadn't won a war, they had only defended their home. But the Zorveni Empire had learned something that day. They had learned that humans were not as weak as they thought. They had learned that humanity would not go down easily. And that was only the beginning. The Zorveni Empire was known for its strength. They had conquered countless worlds, and their fleet was feared across the galaxy. No one could match their power, or so they thought. The Zorveni rulers, confident in their victory, dismissed the humans as nothing more than a myth. They believed that their scout ship had simply run into a small group of Earth's primitive creatures. No one thought much of it. But they were wrong. The truth about humanity was about to hit them like a hammer. A few days after the first failed encounter, the Zorveni military was still laughing off the idea of humans as a threat. The scouts who had returned from Earth told their superiors about the strange encounter, but the leaders of the Empire simply shook it off. A few primitives with clever tricks, they said. Nothing to worry about. The Zorveni were already thinking about their next conquest, another star system to add to their empire. Earth was far off their radar, barely a blip in their grand plans. But then, something strange happened. Zorveni ships began disappearing from the galaxy. It wasn't just one or two ships, it was dozens. Entire fleets sent to nearby systems were lost without a trace. There were no signs of battle. No distress signals. Nothing. Just empty space where once mighty Zorveni warships had been. The Empire's leaders were puzzled, and then terrified. The first reports came from a star system close to the one where Earth was located. A large fleet was sent to investigate the missing ships, but when they arrived, they found only empty space. No wreckage, no survivors, not even a single damaged ship. The fleet's commander, a seasoned officer named Captain Jorax, had never seen anything like it in his career. He called for reinforcements, but when the second fleet arrived, they too vanished. The Zorveni leaders were stunned. How could this happen? Who or what could destroy so many ships without leaving a trace? Whispers started to spread through the Empire. Could it be the humans? They asked. But no one wanted to believe it. The humans were just a myth, right? Captain Jorax was sent to Earth with a massive fleet to find answers. This time, the Zorveni Empire was not going to make the same mistake. They would be prepared. They would bring their full force, enough to crush any resistance that might be left on the planet. The humans would be destroyed, and the myth would be put to rest once and for all. As the fleet entered the solar system, they detected no signs of life on Earth. The planet seemed quiet, still, almost abandoned. The Zorveni commanders felt a strange unease as they approached the planet's surface. The humans had disappeared, right? But then, as they began to descend into Earth's atmosphere, things started to go wrong. The fleet's sensors went haywire. Communications were jammed. Ships were losing power, their engines suddenly sputtering. The Zorveni couldn't understand what was happening. The planet was supposed to be primitive. How could they have advanced technology capable of such interference? Suddenly, from the shadows of the dark sky, the first signs of trouble appeared. A fleet of human ships, small but fast, came out of nowhere. They moved with surprising precision, surrounding the Zorveni fleet. The humans didn't wait to be attacked. They attacked first. Their weapons were primitive compared to the Zorveni's, but their speed and cleverness made them dangerous. The Zorveni were caught completely off guard. They had underestimated the humans. The first Zorveni ship exploded in a fiery blast. It was quickly followed by two more. The humans had used their environment, Earth's atmosphere, to their advantage. They fought in a way no one had expected, a combination of clever strategies and high-tech traps. The Zorveni fleet was in chaos. Captain Jorax tried to regroup his forces, but it was too late. The humans had already taken out several of their ships. Panic spread through the fleet. The humans, once thought to be weak and primitive, were proving to be anything but. They fought with the fury of a species determined to survive, using everything they had to destroy the invaders. The Zorveni Empire, the most powerful force in the galaxy, was being humiliated. By the time the Zorveni realized what was happening, it was already too late. Their fleet was retreating, their pride shattered. They had lost more ships in one battle than they had in hundreds of years of conquering worlds. The humans had shown them something they couldn't ignore: a fierce will to fight, an unbreakable spirit, and a surprising strength that no one had predicted. The galaxy began to hear the stories of what had happened, and the whispers, the fear, began to grow. The Zorveni Empire, which had once laughed at the idea of humans being the threat, was now terrified. They realized too late that they had made a grave mistake. And the galaxy was starting to understand that humans were no longer just a myth. They were a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy had always been a place of order. For centuries, the powerful empires, like the Zorveni, ruled without question. Their fleets dominated the stars, and no one dared challenge their authority. But now, everything was changing. The shocking defeat of the Zorveni fleet at the hands of humans sent ripples throughout the galaxy. And soon, whispers of fear began to spread. It started small, just a few quiet rumors exchanged in dark corners of the galaxy. The first whispers were filled with disbelief. How could humans, a species that had never left their planet before, defeat the mighty Zorveni Empire? It didn't make sense. The Zorveni were known for their unmatched power, their advanced technology, and their ruthless tactics. Yet a small, insignificant planet, Earth, had destroyed an entire fleet. The galaxy struggled to understand what had happened. Some alien species, who had never taken humans seriously, now found themselves questioning their beliefs. Species that had once laughed at the very idea of humans being a threat began to wonder if they had been wrong. Maybe humans were more than just a story. Maybe they were something to fear. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, a meeting was called to discuss the strange events. The council members, a mix of powerful alien species, gathered in a massive room filled with holographic screens and data streams. Most of them had heard the news about the Zorveni defeat, but no one knew exactly how it had happened. The Zorveni had refused to reveal any details of the battle. They only gave one clear message: the humans are not to be underestimated. A few council members laughed at the idea, brushing it off as a fluke. Humans are weak. They have no real technology. The Zorveni must have made a mistake, one alien said. But not everyone agreed. There were others, smaller, less powerful species, that had begun to take the threat seriously. They had seen what humans were capable of. They had heard stories of humans surviving against impossible odds, of their strange resilience and stubbornness. These species had never been part of the great galactic empires. They had learned long ago to be cautious, to survive by staying out of the way of the powerful. And now, they were starting to believe that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The whispers grew louder. They spread from system to system, from planet to planet. Some species began to warn others about the danger of angering humans. They fought the Zorveni and won, they said. What if they come for us next? A few brave traders who had dealt with humans in the past also spoke up. They shared their experiences, describing how humans could survive harsh environments, how they were always willing to fight for what they believed in. They spoke of humans' ability to adapt quickly, learning new skills in a fraction of the time it took most other species. Humans are survivors, they warned. They are not to be underestimated. Soon, the news reached the farthest corners of the galaxy. Even species who had never encountered humans felt the tremors of fear. The stories were everywhere now, of humans fighting back with no advanced weapons, of humans using clever traps and unpredictable tactics that confused even the most skilled warriors. The galaxy, once full of confidence, was now beginning to shake. Back on Earth, the humans had no idea what was happening. They had only defended their planet, fought back against an invader that had underestimated them. But their victory had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, and the whispers only grew. The Zorveni Empire, still reeling from its loss, tried to keep the news quiet. They didn't want to appear weak to the rest of the galaxy. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The once feared empire now seemed vulnerable, and the galaxy was starting to take notice. The whispers of humanity's strength spread like wildfire. They'd reached powerful empires, ancient races, and peaceful planets alike. Some species decided to take action, sending ships to Earth to observe, to learn more about this strange, new force. Others decided to wait and watch, unsure of what would happen next. Fear was growing in the hearts of the galaxy's leaders. How could they control a species like humans? They had never seen anything like it. The humans didn't follow the rules. They didn't play by anyone's standards. They were wild, unpredictable, and that made them dangerous. No one knew what they would do next, and that made everyone nervous. In the darkness of space, a new question was asked. If humans could defeat the Zorvani, who else might they challenge? The galaxy, once calm and orderly, now lived in the shadow of that question. The whispers of humanity's name had already spread far and wide. And now, the galaxy could only wait to see what would happen next. The galaxy had never been so tense. The whispers of humanity's surprising strength had reached every corner of space, and fear had spread faster than anyone expected. The powerful empires, who once controlled the galaxy with ease, were now uncertain. The Zorvani, once the undisputed rulers of the stars, had been humiliated by the humans. And as more species learned about the humans' bravery and fierce will to survive, they started to worry. Could Earth become a threat to them all? For the first time in centuries, the balance of power in the galaxy was in question. And in the midst of all the fear and uncertainty, one question echoed in the minds of every leader. What if humanity comes for us next? On Earth, things were changing too. The humans had no idea how much their victory over the Zorvani had shaken the galaxy. They didn't know the whispers had turned into real fear. All they knew was that their world was no longer safe. The Zorvani, after their crushing defeat, were not willing to leave Earth alone. They wanted revenge. It started with a message sent through the stars by the Zorvani fleet. The message was clear: surrender or face the full force of the Empire. It was a demand, not a request, and it came with the weight of the most powerful military force in the galaxy behind it. The humans had no choice but to respond. In the quiet halls of Earth's leadership, the decision was made. There was no turning back. They couldn't allow their world to fall under the control of the Zorvani, no matter the cost. Humanity had fought once to protect their home, and they would fight again. The war began. The first battle was fierce. The Zorvani fleet, more powerful than anything Earth had ever seen, arrived just outside Earth's atmosphere. They came with hundreds of warships, armed with devastating weapons capable of destroying entire cities in seconds. Their ships were faster, stronger, and much more advanced than anything the humans had. But the humans were not afraid. On the ground, Earth's leaders quickly mobilized their military. They had no fleet of their own, no massive ships ready to fight in the stars. But what they did have was determination. They used their knowledge of the planet, their technology, and their ability to adapt quickly. They turned Earth's cities into fortresses, hiding weapons in places the Zorvani would never expect. The humans didn't have the firepower to go toe-to-toe with the Zorvani's mighty ships, but they had something more valuable: the element of surprise. As the Zorvani ships began to descend, the humans launched their first strike. It wasn't a huge attack. There were no massive battleships or fleets. Instead, the humans used small, fast ships, hidden in Earth's atmosphere, suddenly darting out from behind buildings and mountains. The Zorvani never saw them coming. The first few hits were devastating. Earth's homemade weapons, simple by comparison, managed to penetrate the shields of Zorvani ships. It was a surprise attack that sent shockwaves through the Zorvani ranks. The humans weren't supposed to be able to do this. They weren't supposed to stand a chance. On board the Zorvani flagship, Captain Jorax, who had survived the first disastrous battle, screamed in frustration as the human ships cut through his fleet like a knife through paper. "What are they?" he demanded. "How are they doing this?" The humans had learned quickly, and their fighting spirit was stronger than ever. They adapted on the fly, working together like a well-oiled machine. They didn't have the huge numbers the Zorveni had, but they had something more: unity. Every human, from the highest generals to the youngest pilots, fought as one. They knew this was a fight for survival, and they weren't going to lose. In space, the battle raged on. Zorveni warships tried to regroup and retaliate, but the humans kept pushing back, using guerrilla tactics and surprise strikes. The Zorveni were confused, out of their element. This wasn't a battle they could win with strength alone. The humans had turned the battlefield into a maze where every corner hid a new trap. The war had begun, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Back in the galaxy's heart, the other species watched in disbelief. The mighty Zorveni were losing to the humans. It was unthinkable. No one had ever seen a species rise up so quickly, with such strength and determination. The galaxy had thought it was safe, that the powerful empires would rule forever. But now, that safety was shattered. The humans were no longer just a myth. They were a force, and that force was now challenging the entire galaxy. The Zorveni weren't prepared for this kind of war. They hadn't expected the humans to fight back with such ferocity. And as the first battle of the war ended with a surprising victory for Earth, one thing became clear: the humans weren't going to stop. They would fight for their survival. And they would make sure that no one would ever forget their name. The Zorveni Empire never expected Earth's response to the war. After their humiliating defeat, the Empire's leaders thought they could easily crush the humans with their superior firepower. But what they didn't understand was that humans were not like any other species they had ever encountered. They didn't give up. They didn't surrender. They fought back. The first victory had been a surprise. The humans had used their knowledge of Earth's environment and their quick thinking to strike the Zorveni when they least expected it. But now the war was escalating. The Zorveni had sent reinforcements, their greatest warriors and most powerful ships. They were not going to let Earth's small fleet stand in their way. But the humans were ready. On Earth, the people were united. Every man, woman, and child knew what was at stake. They were fighting not just for their survival, but for their future. Every city had become a battlefield, with the humans using everything they had to fight off the invaders. From high-tech weapons to makeshift traps, nothing was left to chance. The Zorveni may have had advanced technology, but the humans had something stronger: their will to protect their home. General Morgan, one of the leaders of the human resistance, stood at the front lines, watching the sky light up with flashes of fire. Her face was calm, but inside, she knew the weight of the battle. She had led Earth's military forces into countless skirmishes, but this was different. This was a war for their very existence. "We won't let them take Earth," she said, her voice steady but fierce. "Not today. Not ever." The soldiers around her cheered. They were ready. They had been trained for this moment, and they had learned from every battle. Their tactics had evolved quickly, and now they knew how to strike hard and fast, always staying one step ahead of the Zorveni. In space, the battle had become a war of attrition. The Zorveni fleet had suffered losses, but they were still powerful. Captain Jorax, who had survived the first wave of attacks, was more determined than ever to crush the humans. He had underestimated them before, but now he was focused. He had seen firsthand how quickly the humans could adapt, and it made him more cautious. "We will not let Earth stand in our way," he said, staring at the massive fleet of ships. "Prepare for the final assault." The Zorveni launched a full-scale attack on Earth's defenses, sending wave after wave of ships to destroy the human resistance. Their ships fired powerful laser beams, capable of turning cities into rubble. But the humans had learned how to defend against them. Earth's fighters, small but fast, darted through the skies, dodging the blasts and striking back with precision. In the streets, human soldiers used their environment to their advantage. They set up traps, lured Zorveni troops into carefully planned ambushes, and fought with a ferocity that caught their enemies off guard. The Zorveni expected humans to cower before them, but what they found was the opposite. The humans fought like warriors, driven by the belief that their planet was worth protecting. In the heart of the battle, the humans made their boldest move yet. They had developed a new weapon, one that could change the course of the war. It wasn't as powerful as the Zorvani's advanced weaponry, but it had the potential to destroy their ships. It was a risk, but it was their only hope. General Morgan gave the order to launch the weapon. It was a massive device, built from pieces of Earth's own technology, combined with the lessons learned from their previous battles. As the weapon powered up, the sky above Earth shimmered with energy. The Zorvani fleet, still circling above, did not see it coming. The weapon fired. The first blast hit the closest Zorvani ship, and it exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The shockwave ripped through the fleet, sending ships tumbling out of control. The humans had done it. They had struck a blow to the heart of the Zorvani invasion force. But the Zorvani weren't going down without a fight. Captain Jorax ordered his fleet to regroup and retaliate. The humans' victory was short-lived as the remaining Zorvani ships fired back, unleashing their fury on Earth's defenses. Yet, the humans stood strong. They had fought back once, and now they would do it again. In the aftermath of the battle, Earth's cities were scared. But they were still standing. The humans had taken their first blow, but they had dealt one right back. The Zorvani were starting to realize that this war would not be as easy as they had first thought. The humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting for their home, their families, and their future. As the battle raged on, one thing became clear to both sides. The war was far from over. The humans had proven that they would not back down. They had fought back with everything they had, and the Zorvani were now faced with an enemy unlike any they had ever seen before. The galaxy had underestimated Earth once, but it would never make that mistake again. The war had raged on for months, but humanity had shown no signs of backing down. Earth's cities were battered, the skies filled with the smoke of battle, and the ground shook with the force of every new attack. But despite all this, the humans held their ground. They were fighting harder than ever, and each victory, no matter how small, gave them the strength to keep going. But now, the Zorvani were preparing for their final assault. After months of losing ground, they had regrouped, bringing every last ship in their arsenal to Earth's doorstep. Their forces were overwhelming, and they were determined to crush the human resistance once and for all. They had underestimated humanity in the past, and they were not about to make that mistake again. General Morgan stood on the command deck of Earth's Central Command Center, looking out at the large screen displaying the approaching Zorvani fleet. She had seen the destruction they were capable of, and she knew this would be the hardest fight yet. The humans had fought with everything they had, but now the Zorvani were bringing their full power to bear. "We can't let them win," General Morgan said, her voice filled with resolve. "We've come too far to lose now." The soldiers around her nodded, their faces hard with determination. They had already lost so much, but they weren't going to let Earth fall. They were ready to give everything, even their lives, to protect their home. In space, the battle was already beginning. The Zorvani ships launched wave after wave of devastating attacks on Earth's defenses. The sky above was filled with flashes of light as lasers and missiles collided. The humans had fought with incredible bravery in the past, but this time, the Zorvani were pushing them to the edge. "We need more time," one of Earth's commanders said, watching as their defensive lines began to crumble. "We can't hold them off much longer." General Morgan glanced at the clock. Time was running out. But in the chaos of battle, she had one last hope. Earth had developed a final weapon, one that could change the course of the war. It was a risk, a last-ditch effort, but it was their only chance. "We launch it now," General Morgan ordered. "It's the only shot we've got." The weapon was called the Reaper, a device that harnessed the power of Earth's greatest minds. It wasn't fully tested, but if it worked, it would be powerful enough to cripple the Zorvani fleet and force them to retreat. But if it failed, it could destroy everything. As the humans made their final preparations, the Zorvani pressed their assault. The enemy's fleet was closing in, their ships firing relentlessly. The humans' defenses were falling apart under the constant bombardment. General Morgan could see the devastation in her mind, knowing that every second they wasted brought the humans closer to losing everything. At the last possible moment, Earth's final weapon was launched. It rose into the sky like a great fireball, soaring toward the heart of the Zorvani fleet. The Zorvani ships had no idea what was coming. Their attention was fully focused on the humans, and they didn't see the weapon until it was too late. The weapon hit the Zorvani flagship with a massive explosion. The force of the blast ripped through the ship, sending shockwaves through the entire fleet. The Zorvani flagship, the symbol of their power, was obliterated in an instant, and with it, the rest of the Zorvani fleet began to crumble. It was a devastating blow, one that no one saw coming. The Zorvani fleet, once invincible, began to retreat, broken and disorganized. The humans had struck the heart of the Empire. And now, the tide of the war had shifted. General Morgan watched the battle unfold on the screen, her heart racing. The weapon had worked. Against all odds, humanity had delivered the final blow. The Zorvani were retreating, and Earth had won. The humans celebrated, but the victory was bittersweet. So much had been lost in the fight. Cities lay in ruins, and countless lives had been sacrificed. But in the end, Earth had stood strong. They had fought back, not just with weapons, but with the strength of their will. As the last of the Zorvani ships retreated, General Morgan stood tall. She had seen the cost of the war, but she had also seen the resilience of humanity. The humans had proven that they were not to be underestimated. They had fought for their home, and they had won. "We did it," General Morgan said, her voice filled with pride. "Earth is safe." But she knew the galaxy would never forget this war. The Zorvani had been defeated, but the humans had shown something far greater than military strength. They had shown the galaxy that no matter how small a species might be, no matter how impossible the odds, they could still stand against the most powerful forces in the universe. And the galaxy would never whisper humanity's name in fear again. Now, it would be whispered in respect. The war was over. The Zorvani Empire, once the most powerful force in the galaxy, had been defeated. Their fleet had retreated, broken and scattered, their pride shattered. Earth had survived, and humanity had proven to the galaxy that they were a force to be reckoned with. The victory was hard-earned, but it was a victory that would echo through the stars for centuries to come. However, the true impact of humanity's strength was just beginning to unfold. The Zorvani had been only the first of many to underestimate Earth. They had come to conquer, to crush a small, young species that hadn't yet made its mark in the galaxy. What they found instead was a species willing to fight with everything it had, a species that would not bow to anyone, no matter how powerful. In the months following the war, the whispers about humanity spread. The galaxy had always known about Earth, but it had been seen as insignificant, a primitive world far from the centers of power. But now, the galaxy was beginning to realize something far more terrifying. Humanity was not weak. They were strong, resourceful, and willing to fight to the death to protect what they loved. Across the stars, the news of the humans' victory reached every corner of space. The Galactic Council, once certain of its control over the galaxy, now found itself on edge. The humans had defeated the Zorvani, and if they could do that, what else were they capable of? On every planet, from the mighty Calorex to the distant Sahari, leaders began to speak of Earth with caution. The stories of the war spread like wildfire. The once mighty Zorvani, who had crushed entire civilizations with ease, had been forced to retreat by a species they considered inferior. If the humans could defeat them, then no species was truly safe. And that was something no one could ignore. Among the stars, the fear was palpable. There were whispers in dark corners, hushed conversations between old allies. Would humanity come for them next? The Zorvani had learned the hard way not to underestimate Earth, but the rest of the galaxy was now grappling with a new reality. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Humanity was a wild card, unpredictable and fierce. General Morgan stood before the Earth Council, the room silent as the weight of what had happened began to sink in. The humans had won, but the victory came with consequences. No longer could Earth simply live in peace, unnoticed by the larger powers of the galaxy. Humanity had made its mark, and now the galaxy would remember them. "It's not over," General Morgan said, her voice calm but heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. "The Zorvani have been defeated, but the galaxy knows our name now. We've made our enemies, and we've made our allies. We need to be ready for what comes next." The members of the Earth Council nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. The war had ended, but a new era had begun. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They had earned their place among the stars, and with that came both danger and opportunity. In the far reaches of space, the other empires watched Earth's rise with growing concern. They knew that humanity's victory had sent a clear message. The galaxy was no longer a place where the strong could bully the weak without fear of retaliation. The humans had proved that they could fight back, and that knowledge spread like wildfire. It wasn't just the Zorvani who were worried. The Xari, an ancient species known for their stealth and cunning, began to reconsider their approach to Earth. The Korath, a race of warriors who had conquered countless worlds, looked at humanity with a mix of fear and curiosity. The universe had changed. The humans had changed it. The galaxy, once a vast and mostly peaceful place, was now filled with tension. It was no longer a place where the powerful ruled unchecked. Earth had disrupted the balance, and now every species had to ask themselves the same question: what happens when humanity comes for us? The humans had proven that they were capable of anything. They had fought and won against the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. And now, they were a power to be reckoned with. The galaxy would never see Earth the same way again. The humans had made their enemies, and they had made their allies. But most importantly, they had made their mark, and the stars would remember. In the years to come, the story of humanity's rise would be told across the galaxy. From the peaceful worlds to the war-torn planets, everyone would know the name of Earth. It would be whispered in both fear and respect. And the galaxy would never again underestimate the power of the species willing to fight for its survival. As General Morgan looked out at the stars, she knew that the future of humanity was uncertain. But one thing was clear: Earth had proven that it could stand against anything. And in the heart of the galaxy, that was a truth that no one could ignore.